The beast broke free, then guarded the human student like its own. The alarm had been going for 4 seconds. When the wall came down, Nora Webb was 12 FT from Block 7's containment barrier when it stopped. Existing, not cracked, not buckled. Gone, composite panels scattered across the corridor floor like the wall had simply decided it was done with the idea of being a wall. She still had her data tablet in one hand. The Verk stepped through. 3 and 1-2M at the shoulder, 6 limbs. The rear 4 built for driving weight. Forward, the front 2 ending in broad, heavy hands that could close around, pressure steel and convince it to become something else. Scales layered like armor plating, deep blue-black, catching the corridor lights and giving them back wrong. Its head sat low and wide, 4 amber. Eyes moving independently, finding the walls, the floor, the strobing red. Emergency lights, and then finding her. All 4 eyes stopped. Nora did not move. The station was screaming, every alarm running at once, the sound stacking on itself until it stopped being individual tones and became a single continuous pressure against the eardrums. Bulkhead doors were dropping in sequence. Down the main passage, the lockdown grid was engaging in sections, sealing corridors, rerouting personnel, doing everything the engineers had designed it to do for exactly this situation. None of it was aimed at Nora. None of it was going to help her. The Verk looked at her for 3 full seconds. She counted. She did not know why she counted. It was the kind of thing her brain did when it could not process the main event, grab something small and measurable and hold it like a handhold over open water. Then the Verk moved. Not toward her. Around her. It came off the wall where it had been standing, all 6 limbs finding the floor in sequence, and it repositioned deliberately with the careful weight of something that understood exactly where its mass sat in space and had made a decision about where to put it. Between her and the far end of the corridor, Nora's brain caught up approximately 2 seconds later. It was facing away from her, facing the corridor, facing the direction that the security response was going to come from, because that was where the security barracks were, and Nora had been on the station long enough to know that Colonel Crane ran his response drills in under 4 minutes. She heard the boots before she saw the team. 6 soldiers in full containment gear. Pulse rifles up and charged, the barrels showing the faint blue of active discharge coils. Colonel Eli Crane at the front. He came around the corner, already reading the room, his eyes moving fast. The Verk. The broken wall. Nora. The Verk again. He stopped. His team stopped. The Verk did not stop. It settled. All 6 limbs dropped into a low, planted stance, and a sound came out of it that Nora felt more than heard, a subsonic vibration that traveled through the deck plating and up through her boots and into the back of her teeth. Not aggression. A line drawn. Crane's eyes found Nora's face over the Verk's broad back. Webb, his voice was flat and careful. Walk to me now. Nora looked at the 6 rifles. She looked at the Verk scales under the red strobe light, the way the amber of its eyes was visible even from this angle, reflected in the corridor walls. Polished surface. 19 days she had spent at the Block 7 feeding slot, 19 days of 600 hours and 1,800 hours, protein canisters and access codes in the green light that meant the slot was open. Every single time the Verk had been at the interior window, not packing, not pressing at the glass, watching her load the rations with the focused attention of something, memorizing a process it found significant. She had talked to it. Dr. Owen Harl's protocol said not to. No. Vocalization directed at subject. No. Behavioral engagement. Anthropomorphization compromises scientific objectivity. She had talked to it every single time. Anyway, because 19 days of silence felt like the wrong thing to offer something that was clearly paying attention. She had talked about the protein ratios, about the bad coffee, about whether the station's recycled air smelled like rubber to everyone or just to her. The Verk had never responded in any way she could name, but it had listened. She had been certain of that in the way you are, certain of things your instruments cannot measure. Lower your weapons, Nora said to Crane. The words came out even. She noted this, the way she noted things she did not fully understand, with a small flag and a plan to examine it later. Crane's jaw tightened. He was not a man who got angry when people said things he did not like. He was a man who got precise. That is a Category 5 apex predator standing between you and safe extraction. You are going to step around it and come to me. It's facing away from me, Nora said. It has been facing away from me since it came through the wall. Crane said nothing. It's not guarding me in, she said. It's guarding me from. The Verk made the subsonic sound again. Lower this time. Crane's team shifted their weight, not retreating, just acknowledging something their bodies had registered before their training could override it. Nora kept her feet exactly where they were. Dr. Owen Harl's voice came through her earpiece. He must have pulled up the corridor feed from the control room. His voice had the quality of a man watching something happen that he had told himself many times could not happen. Nora, he said, don't move. Already not moving, she said. I mean, don't move toward Crane. She had not been planning to. The standoff held 30 seconds a minute. Crane was still doing the math. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his rifle had not lowered but had also not discharged. He was a man who had protocols. He was looking at a situation that his protocols had not been designed for, because his protocols were built around one central assumption: if the containment subject is between the soldier and the civilian, the subject is the threat. The Verk's 4 amber eyes, visible the corridor wall's reflective surface, had not moved from the team. They had not looked back at Nora once. It already knew where she was. Crane had made a decision. Nora could tell because his posture changed in a specific way. The shoulders settled. The rifle barrel dipped 2 degrees, which in Crane's body language was the equivalent of a different man sitting down and taking a breath. Sergeant Voss, he said, take positions. Beta 3. Nora did not know what Beta 3 meant. The Verk apparently did. It moved before Crane finished the sentence, not toward the team, sideways. 3 steps along the corridor wall, repositioning so that both the original team position and the angle where Voss was directing 3 soldiers were covered. It was not a panicked movement. It was the movement of something that had been watching the soldier since they arrived and had already mapped every possible approach. Crane's jaw tightened again. It tracked the tactical adjustment, Harl said in Nora's ear. His voice had gone Somewhere quiet and careful, the voice he used when he was revising a long-held assumption in real time. That is not instinctual threat response. That is spatial reasoning. I know, Nora said. That changes. I know, she said again. Voss's team had stopped moving. Crane had not given them the signal to proceed because the signal to proceed assumed the subject had not already accounted for their position. The Verk settled again, same planted stance, same subsonic vibration at the low frequency that made the walls feel thin. Its scales moved in a slow ripple. Across its shoulders, the blue-black, shifting to something darker, and Nora had read enough of the observation logs to know that the color shift indicated elevated alertness, not aggression, attention. The Verk was paying very close attention to 6 armed soldiers and calculating things Nora could only partially guess at. She looked at her data tablet. She did not know why she looked at her data tablet. The screen was still showing the protein ratio calculations she had been reviewing when the wall came down. The numbers were irrelevant. The tablet was irrelevant. She held it anyway. Owen, she said into her earpiece. I'm here. What's its physical threshold? The pulse. Rifles with a standard charge penetrate the scale layer. No, a pause. A sustained burst from multiple units. Yes, but the discharge heat would compromise the corridor structure, and we are directly over the station's primary power conduit. She looked at Crane. He had not been on the earpiece channel, but he was watching her face. You already know you can't fire, she said to him. He looked at her for a long moment. Not without risk to the conduit, no. So we're standing here until I find another option, he said. Yes. The Verk made a different sound, not the subsonic warning vibration, something shorter, something that moved up through the register from bass to something almost audible, a brief pulse that Nora felt in her sternum. She had heard it before. Twice, both times at the feeding slot. After the rations had loaded and the green light confirmed delivery, she had assumed it was a digestive sound. She had logged it as unknown vocalization. Category, feeding behavior, and moved on, standing 12 FT behind the creature that had just made it. She reconsidered her categorization. It just made the slot sound, she said. What? Harold's voice sharpened. The sound it makes at the feed slot. After the rations go in, it just made that sound. She paused. I logged it as a feeding response. Silence on the earpiece. Oh, and I'm thinking, he said. Crane's eyes were moving between her and the Verk with the focused attention of a man updating a threat model on the fly. What feeding response? Possibly not a feeding response, Nora said. Then what? She thought about 19 days of standing at a feed slot and talking about nothing. About protein ratios and bad coffee and recycled air, about the way she had felt watched and how she had decided that being watched was not the same as being threatened. Possibly it was directed at me, she said, the sound not at the food. Crane stared at her. I know how that sounds, she said. It sounds like a civilian anthropomorphizing a Category 5 containment subject, he said. Yes, she said, it does. The Verk shifted its weight, not a repositioning, a small adjustment, one of the front limbs lifting briefly and replacing itself slightly forward, and Nora recognized this too because it did this at the observation window. Sometimes that small forward weight shift when she had been in the middle of talking and paused for a moment. She had thought it was coincidence every time. It was possible she had been wrong about a number of things she had logged as coincidence. I'm going to try something, she said. Crane's voice went flat. Webb. Not dangerous, she said. I'm just going to talk to it. The silence from Crane was the silence of a man choosing very deliberately not to say 7 specific things. Nora took one step forward. The Verk's color shifted again, not darker but brighter along the shoulder. Scale layer, a quick ripple of blue iridescence that traveled up to the base of its skull and back. She had not seen that before. She filed it immediately. Unknown behavior. Category response to stimulus, the stimulus being her moving voluntarily closer. Hey, she said. Her voice came out the same way it always did at the feed slot, even moderate volume, the way she talked when she was not performing calm and was just actually calm because she had run out of energy to perform it. 19 days of 600 hours and 1800 hours will do that. The feed slot stops being frightening when it is just a task you do every day. The Verk turned its head, not its body. Its body stayed planted, still covering the team. Just its head rotating on that broad neck until 2 of the 4 amber eyes were aimed back at her. 2 eyes on the team. 2 eyes on her. It was, she thought, the most efficient compromise she had ever seen. I don't know what you want, she said. I don't know if you understand what's happening or if you do and you're dealing with it better than I am, which honestly is very possible. She paused. I just want you to know that I'm not afraid of you. This was true, she found examining it. That it was straightforwardly true. The Verk made the sound again, the sternum sound, shorter this time too. Quick pulses instead of one sustained note. Harold's voice in her ear was barely a whisper. Nora, I need you to catalog everything it does. Every sound, every color shift. She was already doing it. Her thumb moved across the tablet's input surface. Logging. The standoff lasted another 12 minutes. In those 12 minutes, Nora documented 11 separate color shifts, 4 distinct vocalizations, and 1 incident she would spend 2 weeks arguing about in written reports. 8 minutes in, one of Voss's soldiers took 3 steps forward without an order. She did not know why. It did not matter. The Verk covered 4M in something less than a second, not toward her, toward the soldier. It placed itself directly in front of him at a distance of approximately 4 ft, close enough that the soldier had to crane his neck to see its face. It did not touch him. It stood there, all 4 eyes on him. The subsonic vibration running steady and low. A line being drawn again, clear and patient. The soldier took 3 steps back. The Verk returned to its position in front of Nora. Crane said very quietly, stand down. All positions stand down. The Verk's shoulder scales rippled once. That quick iridescent flash, and then stilled. Nora picked her tablet up off the floor, where it had fallen during the rapid movement. The screen had cracked along one corner. The data was intact. She logged 1 word at the end of the incident entry. Deliberate. 3 hours into the standoff, Director Lyle Amberton arrived from Central Command via encrypted relay. Nora had never spoken directly to Amberton. She was an intern. Amberton ran a network of 17 research stations across 4 star systems, and communicated primarily with people whose job titles had the word director in them. She knew him from briefings the way you know a weather pattern, something that shaped conditions without being present. For them, he appeared on the corridor's wall-mounted comm screen at exactly the size of a man who had decided the situation was large enough to require his face. "Dr. Harrell," he said, "situation report." Harrell's voice came back through the corridor speaker. He was still in the control room. "The Verk breached Block 7 approximately 3 hours ago. It has not attacked. It is currently positioned in Corridor C between the response team and intern Webb." "Between," Amberton said. "Between, Director, yes." A pause. "It's using her as a shield." Nora's hand tightened on the tablet. "No," she said. Amberton looked at her. His expression was the expression of someone adjusting to a variable he had not expected to need an opinion from. "Intern Webb," Harrell said carefully, "has been the Block 7 feeding attendant for the duration of the Verk's containment. And you believe this is related to the subject's current behavior?" "The subject," Nora said, "moved between me and the response team. It moved between me and a soldier who advanced without orders. It has not touched me. It has not made a threat display directed at me in 3 hours." Amberton looked at Crane. Crane said nothing. His silence was a form of confirmation. "The protocol for a Category 5 containment breach," Amberton said, "is termination of the subject if recontainment is not achievable within." "You can't fire in this corridor," Nora said. "The power conduit." "I'm aware of the conduit. The protocol can be enacted from an external position. We have access to the station's external grid." He paused. "I need the corridor cleared." The Verk made a sound. Not the subsonic warning, not the sternum pulse, something new, a rising vocalization that moved up through registers Nora did not have words for. Sound that made Crane's team take a collective step backward without anyone giving an order. The corridor lights flickered. Nora looked at the Verk. The scale color was doing something she had not cataloged before. A wave pattern, moving from the base of the tail forward, across the full length of the body, deep blue cycling to almost white and back, over and over like something was running electricity through it. "Owen," she said. "I see it," he said. His voice was strange. "Point the optical sensor at it. I need a full spectrum reading." She raised the tablet. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Harrell said, "but I've seen the preliminary data from the Verk intake scans, that wave pattern, the bioelectric signature of that response. It's not aggression, it's not territorial." And GT snorts. And GT, the closest match in my database is a documented behavior in the sarin hive species. It's how they signal. He stopped. "Owen, it's how they signal recognition of a bonded unit," he said. "The wave pattern is a declaration. It's telling the corridor in the only language it has that you are under its protection." Amberton's voice from the comm screen was very controlled. "That is an interpretation of animal behavior that cannot be verified." "Actually," Harrell said, and the careful quality in his voice was gone, replaced by something that sounded very much like a scientist who had spent 30 years waiting to be wrong in an interesting way. The spectral data is quite clear. Doctor, it has not harmed her in 3 hours while the physical capacity to do so was constant and the opportunity was continuous. Director Amberton, I spent my career studying xenobiology. I have never made a claim like this before, and I'm making it now. This subject has formed a protective bond with this. In turn, the mechanism is identical to bonding behavior observed in 3 other documented species. The bond appears to be, I want to be, precise, one-directional in its origin. The subject chose her. Silence on the line. Nora thought about 19 days about talking to something through a feed slot, because silence felt wrong about how she had never considered, not once, that it might be listening for a reason. I chose it too, she said. I just didn't know I was doing it. Nobody responded to that. The Verk had stilled, the wave pattern faded, and the scales settled back to deep blue-black. 2 of the 4 amber eyes were on the calm screen on Amberton's face, specifically in the way it had tracked the soldier who advanced. It had identified the threat source from a wall-mounted screen and positioned its body in response. Nora was increasingly certain that subject was not the right word for something capable of that. Director, she said, if you clear the corridor, I'll walk out with it. That's not a sentence I can approve. Amberton said. You don't have to approve it, she said. You have to clear the corridor so the response team isn't in the path. If something goes wrong, the decision is mine. Crane's head turned toward her slowly. His expression was unreadable, which meant he was working very hard to keep it that way. Webb, he said. Colonel Crane, she said in the same even tone, I have been standing 12 feet from a Category 5 containment subject for 3 hours, and I have not been harmed. I have some data at this point. He looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the Verk. He looked at the cracked tablet in her hand, the data still running on its screen. Clear the corridor, he said to his team. They moved, 6 soldiers and Voss, stepping back past the bulkhead line, filing through a side access door with the discipline of people who had been told to do something by their commanding officer and had chosen to trust that he had a reason. The door sealed behind them. The corridor was quiet. The alarms had cut off some time in the last half hour. She had not noticed exactly when. The red strobes had cycled down to the steady amber of an active alert status. Nora looked at the Verk's back. She took 1 step toward it. It did not move. Another step. Still nothing. She came up to stand beside it, not behind it, beside it, and she looked at the amber alert light reflecting off its shoulder scales. Okay, she said in the same voice she had used at the feed slot for 19 days. Let's figure out what we're doing next. The Verk looked down at her. Just looked. 2 amber eyes the size of her fists, holding light and turning it back. Changed. She held its gaze and did not look away. Director Amberton had made calls. Nora found this out 2 hours later when the military transport docked at Station 14's outer port, and 12 soldiers in a different kind of armor from Crane's team came through the access bridge. These ones had not run drills in this station. They did not know where the power conduit ran. Crane met them at the port. Nora heard the conversation through the open comm channel Harold had patched her into. She could not see it. She was in Corridor C, which was where she had been for 5 Hours, but she could hear Crane's voice, doing something she had not heard it do before. Arguing. The external strike order requires clearance from the station director. Crane said, "We have authorization from Sector Command," the incoming officer said. Her voice was businesslike. "Dr. Amberton issued the request. Dr. Amberton doesn't have military jurisdiction over. He has research asset jurisdiction, which covers any threat to station integrity. The containment subject has been classified as an active threat to station integrity. That's enough." A pause, a long one. "What's your name?" Crane asked. "Captain Dara Holt." "Captain Holt, I have a personnel asset in Corridor C, a civilian intern. She is currently 12 feet from the containment subject and has been for 5 hours without incident. She needs to be extracted. She has declined extraction. Then we wait for her to change her mind," Holt said. "And if she doesn't?" Holt did not answer immediately. Nora saved the conversation file to her tablet. She looked at the Verk. It was standing at the corridor junction, where the C-wing met the main passage, and it had been standing there since Crane's team cleared out, moving only when Nora moved, tracking her not closely, not constraining her, but keeping a consistent angle between itself and any approach direction. It had not eaten in 5 hours. "You're probably hungry," she said. The Verk scales shifted. One front limb moved, that small forward weight shift she had catalogued a dozen times. "I don't have your rations," she said. "I'm working on it." She opened a text channel to Harold. "Can we get a protein delivery to the C-wing junction, mobile unit, not the fixed slot?" A pause. "Nora, there is a military team that just docked." "I know. Can we get the delivery?" Another pause. "Give me 10 minutes." She sat down on the corridor floor, her back against the wall, tablet in her lap. The Verk looked at her. She looked back. This was the part she could not have explained to Amberton or Holt or anyone who had not spent 19 days at the feed slot. She was not afraid, and it was not because she was certain she was safe. It was because fear has requirements, and one of those requirements is uncertainty about whether something is a threat, and she was no longer uncertain. The Verk was not a threat to her. It was a threat to the 12 soldiers who had just docked if they came down this corridor. It was a threat to the station in the way that anything very large and very protective of something it had decided was valuable is a threat to anyone who approaches that value incorrectly. That was a different calculation. She heard the mobile delivery unit. Before she saw it, the quiet hum of the track-driven base, the rattle of the protein canister in its housing. Harold had managed it in 8 minutes. The Verk heard it too. Its head turned, 4 eyes tracking the sound, and then the scale wave again, not the full body declaration from before, just a brief ripple across the shoulder plates, and she understood this one now. It was not a warning wave. It was what happened when it recognized something it associated with her. The delivery unit arrived at the junction and stopped. The Verk looked at it, looked at Nora. "Go ahead," she said. It ate. She watched it eat and thought about 12 soldiers in armor who did not know where the power conduit ran, and she thought about what Holt had not answered when Crane asked what happens if Nora does not change her mind. The explosion gave her the answer before Holt could. It did not come from Holt's team. It came from the station's outer hull, a Concussion blast from an external strike sector commands resolution to a problem that paperwork had not been fast enough to solve. And GT snorts. And GT. The blast was not large enough to breach the hull, it was large enough to shear the secondary support struts in the sea. Wing ceiling. The ceiling came down. Not all of it, a section 3M of composite support structure and paneling directly above the corridor. Junction. Directly above Nora. She did not have time to move, she had time to look up and understand what was happening, which was its own specific kind of clarity. The Verk was faster. It covered the distance between them, 4m on 6 limbs in something under a second, and it came over her, all that mass lowering into a canopy, the broad back taking the impact of 3m of ceiling structure as it came down. The sound was enormous, metal on scales, composite panel fragments scattering across the floor. The Verk absorbed it. It did not move from over her. Dust, heat from a secondary conduit in the wall, hot enough to dry out the air. Nora's ears ringing from the impact. She was not hurt. She put her hand on the floor and pressed her palm flat and felt the decking solid and still. Her tablet was still in her other hand. The crack in the corner had spread. Nora, Harl's voice in her ear was a different frequency than she had ever heard from him, not calm, not careful. Just a person who had heard an explosion and was waiting to find out what came next. Still here, she said. A pause that was its own kind of data. The external strike came from a sector. Command authorization, he said. Amberton did not request an external order, someone above him. I know, she said. The Verk had not moved. Above her she could hear it breathing, a deep, rhythmic sound that she felt as much as heard, a low vibration through the air. In the small protected space its body had made, the ceiling debris was settled on its back, and it was bearing that weight the way it bore everything she had watched it do in 5 hours. With absolute steadiness. She looked at the tablet in her hand. The screen had gone dark from the impact but came back when she pressed it, data intact. She opened a recording. Day 19, she said into the recorder. The same way she had narrated feeding. Logs for 19 mornings, the Verk has demonstrated protective bonding. Behavior, spatial reasoning, calibrated. Threat response, and now structural load. Bearing in the interest of subject. Safety. She paused, subject being me. She could feel the Verk breathing above. Sorry. I think we've been studying the wrong one of us, she said. Crane reached the Seawing Junction 14 minutes after the external strike. He came with 4 of his own soldiers, and none of Holt's team, which told Nora something about the conversation that had happened at the port access bridge. In those 14 minutes, she would find out later that Crane had physically blocked the corridor access and cited 17 separate station safety regulations at Captain Holt until she agreed to wait for a sector command clarification. Crane had a gift for citing regulations in a way that made noncompliance feel administratively overwhelming. He was a useful person. He stopped at the edge of the debris field. The Verk was still over Nora, still bearing the ceiling section on its back, still breathing in that slow, felt vibration, its 4 amber eyes tracked. Crane. Webb, he said. Colonel, are you hurt? No. He looked at the Verk, he looked at the ceiling section distributed across its back. He looked at Nora sitting cross-legged on the floor beneath it, with a cracked data tablet in the calm expression of someone who had been sitting in a very unusual situation long enough to have made peace with it. "Can it get that off its back?" he asked. "Probably," she said. "It hasn't tried yet." "Why not?" "Because I'm still here," she said. "I think it's waiting for me to move first." Crane processed this. "Then move," he said. She stood up slowly. The Verk tracked her, those front eyes rotating. She stepped clear of the debris perimeter onto the open corridor floor, and the Verk moved with a single powerful shrug, a full body flex that sent the ceiling section and its attached debris sliding off its scales and onto the floor in a controlled, directed way. Not scattered, placed, like it had thought about where the debris should land. Crane's 4 soldiers had their hands on their weapons and had not drawn them. Nora noted this as a significant act of discipline. The Verk stood clear of the debris and looked at Crane. Crane looked back. Nobody moved for 8 seconds. Then the Verk did something Nora had not seen before. It lowered its head, not a threat display, nothing defensive in the geometry of it, and it held it down, the broad skull angled toward the floor, all 4 eyes still open and watching, but the body language carrying something she did not have a precise word for. Not submission. Acknowledgement. "Owen," she said into the earpiece, "are you seeing this on the feed?" "Yes," Harl said. "Category unknown new." A pause. "It's watching." Crane, not you. "It's directing the behavior at Crane." "It knows he held the corridor," Nora said. Silence. Harl stopped, started again. "It understood that Crane intervened on your behalf." "Yes." Nora, "that requires inferential reasoning about social intention. That is not," he stopped again. "That is not where we classified the species." "I know," she said. "We classified them as sophisticated predators with territorial behavior patterns. We did not classify them as—" "I know," she said again. Captain Dara Holt arrived at the corridor entrance behind Crane's team. She had not brought her soldiers. She was alone, and she was carrying a sector command comm unit, and her expression was the expression of someone who had received a signal in the last 14 minutes that had significantly altered the parameters of her mission. "Intern Webb," she said. Nora turned. "Sector Command has issued a hold order on all further strike authorizations related to Station 14. Pending a xenobiology review, the subject is to be reclassified from Category 5 containment breach to unknown classification pending new data." Holt paused. "New data apparently includes approximately 6 hours of behavioral documentation from your personal tablet." Nora looked at the cracked screen in her hand. "It's a good tablet. Dr. Harl transmitted your logs 40 minutes ago." Someone snorts at Sector Command has a xenobiology background, and they read the spectral analysis. Another pause. "They read it twice." "What changed their position?" Crane asked. Holt looked at the Verk standing at the far end of the corridor debris field. She looked at it for a long moment. "The restraint data," she said, 6 hours. Continuous proximity, capacity, and opportunity present throughout, no harm delivered." She paused again. "In 6 hours, a Category 5 containment subject was in a position to eliminate every person in this corridor and chose Not two every time that pattern, she stopped. The xenobiologist said the pattern has a name. Yes, Harl's voice said through the corridor speaker. He had opened the broadcast channel. It does. The name was not the word Nora would have chosen because the word was clinical and the thing it described was not. The word was mutualism, a biological relationship in which both parties derive benefit from the association. It was the word used for small fish that cleaned the teeth of large ones, for birds that ate the insects off the backs of animals that could have eaten the birds. The word did not seem right for this. She thought about 19 days about talking to something through a feed slot because silence felt like the wrong thing to offer something that was paying attention. About how small and unmeasurable the thing she had done was, just talked, just showed up, just treated a large and frightening creature as something worth addressing directly. The Verk looked at her. She looked back. We're going to reclassify everything, Harl said, the entire species taxonomy, the behavioral parameters, the intelligence threshold assessment, everything we thought we knew about the Verk. Based on this, he paused, based on what you documented. Based on what it did, Nora said. Yes, that too. She walked across the corridor and sat down against the wall, a few feet from the Verk, in the same posture she had used when she sat down at the corridor junction with her tablet, cross-legged, tablet in her lap, data running. The Verk did not move away. She looked at Crane. He was watching both of them with the expression of a man who had spent the last 6 hours revising his assumptions in stages and had arrived at the end of the revision somewhere he had not expected to land. Not alarming. Significant. What happens now? Holt asked. Nora opened a new log entry on the cracked tablet. Day 19, she said into the recorder. New phase of study beginning now. She looked at the Vark. 4 amber eyes holding light, turning it back, changed. She did not look away. Outside the station's hall in the space where the sector command transport sat, holding a strike order that had been suspended, 6 technicians were reviewing the spectral data for the 3rd time and trying to find the language for something that their classification systems did not have a slot for. They would not find the language today. The language would come later, built out of months of new data, out of Nora's daily logs and Harol's revised taxonomies, and the testimony of a colonel who had stood in a corridor and watched a creature take 3 meters of falling ceiling rather than step aside. The language would come, but the understanding was already in the room, sitting against a corridor wall on the 14th station of an outpost at the edge of charted space. 2 beings from entirely different biological lineages breathing the same recycled air. That was how it started. That was how everything starts. With someone who showed up